And we continue learning Dirshu Mishnah Berurah Hilchais Tefillah. Today we begin another Siman is Sadi Zayin, in which the Mechaber coins this Siman Shelo Yigahek V'lo Shelo Yifahek B'Shas Tefillah. The different bodily occurrences and emissions that one has to be cognizant and careful of in middle of davening. Says the Mechaber in Sev Aleph, Lo Yigahik. Now what is Yigahik? The Ramah over here explains, Moitzi migufay lepev neficha mitoich savai. This is what we'd probably call a burp. That, due to your satiation, due to how full you are, there emits a sound from your mouth. A rutiyur biaz, v'lo yifahik. What's a peak? Says the Ramah, Paiseach pev lo iti ruach. That sounds like a yawn. Let's say you need to, it happens. So you cover your mouth so you don't see the opening of your mouth. And says don't put your hand on your santero. We'll see what that means, because that is gaiva. So we're seeing over here, one has to be careful not to yawn and not to burp in the middle of davening, and if one needs to yawn, cover up your mouth. So we continue over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Aleph. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Now Sadi Zayin Sif Katan Aleph. You got to go. It's on the bottom of the page over here. And if you need to lifahek mitoich einis, that if one comes to yawn not on purpose, it's an einis. What should he do? So says the Mishnah Berurah, one second, let's make sure you can see it. There you go. Says the Mishnah Berurah, who didn't to be giyok is like a surah. Same thing if someone needs to burp, it's not ulcer, so why didn't the Mechaber talk about such a case? Because then there's no chiyuv, there's no obligation to cover your mouth. Why? When you yawn, your mouth is open all the way. That's not nice. You got to cover your mouth. But if someone burps, his mouth doesn't open up so much, and it's a very short amount of time, if there's no obligation to cover your mouth. But the Mechaber concluded Sif Aleph for telling us you should not put your hand on your santerai. Says that the Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Beis Hainu Lechi Atachtoin V'Chazanim Ha'Oisekim V'Shas HaZemher Mutter. It's allowed if you shouldn't miskam the gases. It's not because they want to be haughty, alahanin as I call it, rather to make their voice sound pleasant. V'Shas HaZemher Aser. We continue over here with Sif Beis. Says the Mechaber in Sif Beis Aser Lo'ila Roik. Can't spit. And if it's impossible, we turn over to the next page of Mechaber over here. If it's impossible, what is the halacha? Says the Mechaber, you should put it inside a tissue, a handkerchief, so that it's not recognizable to everyone. And if you are an istanis, that it's disgusting. Can handle seeing something disgusting. You can't put it in your clothing. You spit it behind you. Says the Ramah, to your left, you don't spit to your right, and certainly not in front of you, we're going to see in Siman that when you bow first to the left, which is the right of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So asks the Ramah, so why are you spitting to the left, which is the right of a Kadosh Baruch Hu? The Shechina doesn't descend within 10 Tvachim of the ground. And therefore, we give more cover to the right side if one needs to spit, so you do not spit to the while you're davening. But in Siman Kuf Chav Gimel, we're talking about the 3 steps that one takes. When you take the 3 steps, you're walking away from your davening, and you're facing the Shechina. Therefore, you go left first, which is the right of Hashem. So that is the reason why over here you were spitting to the right, even though seemingly one would ask, but the right is more chashuv, because we want to stay away from the left, which is the let's say that better, one more time. the Ramah said, if it's impossible to zarka la'acharav, you should spit to the left. The opposite of what I just said, excuse me. And the kasha is, why are you spitting to the left? The left is the right of Hashem. You should spit to the right. So answered up, the Ramah, the reason is there's a fundamental difference between bowing when it comes to Isa Shalom, the 3 steps, and when it comes to spitting. Let's go back to the Mishnah Berurah at the beginning of Sif Beis, Sif Kot and Gimel. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Laroik, V'chol she'asr b'tach hatfila asr afilu, anything that is asr during davening, it is asr even during the tachanunim shel achar tefillah. Any of the supplications after Shemona Esrei T'chol Zman Shel Hapas Avli Kaim L'Fnei HaMelech. Anytime you didn't take the 3 steps back, it's as if you're standing in front of the king. Im Yav Shalai, if there's nothing you could do, you need a spit, Sefkat and Dali, Kigoin She'istar B'zeh, V'yetar B'tfilasai, then you do it, you're Mavliya it in your Ksusai. Before we turn over here, let's take a moment to... Thought we were going to take a moment to see the Dirshu, but the page of Dirshu is not here. Okay, so let's continue. Continuing with the Mishnah Berurah Sivkata, in the middle of Sivkata and Dalit over here. And after you spit, after one spits, he shall wait the amount of time to walk 4 Amitz. Kulel Sim Sadi Beis Sivtes. Shloye near Sivkata and Heki. Go and begin at Tachtain. Again, what's this going back on? Let's remind ourselves. This is going in the on the mechaber. That why you mavliya b'ksusai, so that it is not visible, that the roik is not visible. So says the Mishnah Berurah one more time. Sefkat today shall yinir ki go mebeged atachtoin. Aval beged elyon to spit on your jacket. It's the same issue. The whole point over here is to make it in a way that it's not going to be disgusting. If you split an outer garment, it's quite gross. I guess that's like an over jacket. It'll be mutter. And I guess we'll just point out that nowadays this is obvious, and the answer is a good old-fashioned tissue. If it's disgusting to put in your clothing, or you can't do that, no, you're wearing a nice suit and you don't want to get it filthy, that's going to cause him more tarud. He's not going to be able to daven properly. So what should he do? If you turn your head backwards, not upwards, because that looks like a kaifer. The fun of Shechina is in front of you. If you have no other choice, then you're going to be allowed to do that even in front of you. And we continue over here with the Mishnah Berurah. Some say that what is the reason? Say the achronim. Again, we're trying to understand the difference between our halacha, in which we're learning that you're supposed to spit to the left, even though seemingly that is the right of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whereas when it comes to bowing, we say that you bow to the left, which is the right of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So how do we understand these two seemingly contradictory halachas? So says the Mishnah Berurah Sefkat the test. While he's spitting, the kavod of the Shechina is not going to be by him anymore. It's not going to be, it's not going to be by him anymore. Therefore, as Lina Bas Yeminu Small Shel Adam. So we go Basta the regular right and left of people. When you're bowing to the Shechina. Then we're going to go with the right of the Shechina. If you're bowing, you're certainly bowing to the Shechina, meaning the simple answer of the Achrayim is, what are you doing? Here, when you're spinning, you're doing something that's anti-Shechina. So Shechina is not going to be there as you quickly get rid of your spin and whatnot. Whereas when you're bowing to the Shechina. Before we move on to Sif Gimel, let's just go back over here and see a drop of the Dirshu. Now, first of all, the Dirshu points out, why are you waiting for Amos? Number 4, quotes Aruch HaShulchan, so it should not look like Ki Yorik Amashem Achach. If you spit and you immediately daven right away, it looks like you're spitting towards the davening, God forbid, and therefore you don't want to do that. The Kavachayim writes, Shashem Nisham, maybe there'd be a little roik in your mouth, and it's not nice, not appropriate to daven in such a manner. Fine, very good. Let's continue. Dirshu number 6, Beged Tachtoin. What about the spit on the floor? In a way that will be absorbed into the ground, you won't be able to see it. It says, Shulchan Aruch Harav, even though, if we can, still it is better to go into a bag, and even though it could go into the ground, but it's better to do it in an area that's mamish, and get rid of a tissue and whatnot. Shezarko B'yad L'Acharim, number 7, Dirshu over here points out that when you finish one Esrei, he says the Shulchan Shleima, that you should go find your spit and you should walk, you should push it into the ground, because it's disgusting, as we saw already. Actually, we're going to see some Kufnan Aleph, cover Beis HaKnesses, you should cover over the right, you don't want to leave it there on the floor. And we just concluded that the difference between spitting and the saying Oisei Shalom, one is to the Shechina, one is not. So Dirshu note number 8 says, therefore when you're going to spit, you're going to go by the right and left of people. And the classical shayla, every time we have right and left in Shulchan Aruch, what do you do if you're a lefty? Says Rav Chaim Kanievsky, quoting a Pri Megadim, we go his own personal right and left. Similarly, the Kavachayim writes that Rav Chaim Kanievsky writes the same. However, Rav Chaim adds on, according to the reason of Magen Avraham, in the name of the Shibali Aleket, that the right is also and the left is mutter. Why? Hashem shil silcha shel al yad yaminecha. So then the iter yad, a lefty, will do the same thing because it's not subjective to him by himself. And we continue with the Mechaber in Sif Gimel. Says the Mechaber, im kinoi oy katztoi. You have a kino, you have a louse that is biting you in the middle of davening. Should move your clothing around to get rid of it. You don't want it to mess up your davening. Don't pick up that louse with your hand. Says the Ramah, you're allowed to get rid of a louse, not during davening, even though you're in a shul. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sivkatin Yod Aleph, Ve'im avar, and let's say someone did, he should not have taken out the louse with his hand. But let's say he did, what should he do? Again, you're in the middle of Shemoneh Esrei. That's the problem over here. And since you're in the middle of Shemoneh Esrei, you can't stop to wash your hands. So says the Mishnah Berurah, what should you do? Wipe your hand on the wall, as we've seen many times in a scenario that you can't wash your hands. At the very least, you wipe them off. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if you touch a kina, you touch a louse, you have to wash your hands. Because of the ruach harav kolshkein, and you have to wash your hands for davening. We continue with We continue with, and by the way, that's the reason, let's just speak it out full, that's the reason why there's a chiddush over here in the Ramah that not during davening you are allowed to take out the kina, even though you're in a shul. Just you'll have to wash your hands because your hands will have the ruach ra on them. Says the Mechaber in Sif Daled. If your towel falls off, I should say falls off, it moves, you're able to put it back on. Don't put your towels back on. Why? Because it is a hefsek. Says the Mishnah Berurah. So if your talus moves around, even the majority falls, you'll have to fix it during Shemoneh Esrei. But if kulais, if gotin yedalat, even if you're holding it, the putting back on is the hefsek. Let's say you did. Let's say you didn't know this halacha. So your talus falls off in the middle of Shemoneh Esrei. You pick it up, you put it back on. So now you made a mafsik because the wrapping of the towels is an interruption to your tefillah. Still says Mishnah Berurah, you do not have to go back to the beginning of the bracha. Continue wherever you're up to. When you finish davening, you move around your towels and you make a new bracha. A zaken that's wearing good old-fashioned glasses. And we refu and bechat by the loose in your nose. Shekarav lipo, they're going to fall off his nose. He's bowing. Tie your glasses on with a string. So you shouldn't put on your towels middle of davening. Why not? Here it is. Sure, many people were bothered. It said your towels fell off. You middle of Shemon Esrei. Says the Mechaber, you're not allowed to put it back on. So you're sitting there in shul. Your towels is sitting there. It might be quite difficult to have kavanah. So again, the right thing to do is, I'm standing in front of the king right now. That's my towels. That's the king. Continue davening. Even if, again, we said you caught the towels, it's in your hand, still you can't put it back on. But now, says the Mishnah Berurah, and this is the same practical halacha that we keep on falling back to, that if lemaisa you're going to be tarud, if practically you're not going to be able to have kavanah because you're thinking about the sitter that fell, the child that's crying, and now the example that the towels that fell, then at the end of the bracha, you are indeed allowed to put it back on. We conclude today's shir with Sif Hey. You're carrying a load, and this Zman Tefillah comes, it's not such a big package, you throw it over your back and you daven. If it's a large package, you put it on the ground and you daven. It says Mishmur Sefkat and Yitzayin. Because a very heavy package, if you're holding it, it's mevatel your kavanah. Before we call it a day, let's just take a moment over here to look at the Dirshu. Dirshu note number 11 says, what about killing a parash, which is like a mosquito? We already learned in Siman Dalet, if you touch it, could be it's enough just to wipe your hands and you don't have to actually wash them. Again, netilas yadayim, wash your hands is more for ruach, raw. We said even if the rive of your towels fell off, similarly, number 12, Dirshu points out, similarly if your tefillin become loose and they're not tight, says our chashulchan, you're able to tighten them like your talis, and that's not called a hefsek. But if the talis fell off entirely, you should not put it on. Why? Because the atifa, the wrapping is the hefsek, says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Dirshu. No, number 13 over here, it's mashman simin ches, Adam Acher is able to take it and put it on his body for him. That's a pretty classical situation. The chaz in the middle of whatever, the talis falls off, someone else comes and puts it on him, but he himself should try not to. If he can't and have kavanah, then he's allowed to. If he's carrying a heavy masay shal arba'as kavim, then it's going to be a vatal's kavanah. How much is arba kavim? So Rechayim knows 5.5 kilo, which is pretty big. That's, I don't know, every kilo is 2.2 pounds. So that's 12, that's almost 13 pounds. Pretty heavy. Says the Chazon Ish, it's 10 liters. And I guess the classical example maybe would be a knapsack. If you have someone who's wearing like a light knapsack, he'd be able to wear that while he davens. But if it's a heavier knapsack that's going to be on his mind the whole time, then he cannot. We'll pick it up from Siman Sadi Ches in the next shiur.